If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you found this podcast, and I hope that what I share here will help you put an end to any form of binging. You can learn all of the fundamentals about my approach in my free ebook. It's called the Brain Over Binge Basics, and that is linked in the show description. And you can also get it on brainoverbinge.com right on the homepage. On my website, you'll also see that you can now get one-on-one coaching with Coach Julie, who was on the podcast in the previous 2 episodes. Those are episodes 83 and 84. And if you have not listened to those episodes yet, I really encourage you to do that because Julie's story of recovery after 40 years of struggling is so inspiring, and you'll also learn about all of the ways that ending binge eating will make your life so much better. I want each of you listening to have freedom around food, and I believe that what I'm going to talk about today will help you toward that goal. The topic of this show is dropping the shoulds around eating. And what I mean by this is to stop telling yourself that your eating should be a certain way, or that you should be eating this or that amount, or this or that food, or that you should be avoiding eating altogether at certain times. I want to help you have more peace with food. And a big part of that is not feeling so much pressure and stress each time you have a meal because you're caught up in thinking that there's one right way that you should be eating at that meal. It's so exhausting to think that there are rules to follow with food and that at each meal you're somehow supposed to do it right, or that you somehow should be eating differently than you are. You may have thoughts saying you're eating too much or not enough, or the wrong foods at the wrong times, or you're not being mindful enough while you're eating, or you're eating too fast or too slow, or just that your eating should have been different in some way. And also, when you have a binge eating habit, what tends to happen is for all of these shoulds to end up with you having an urge to binge. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you're like most people who binge, your binging behavior might have become strongly connected to breaking your diet, or eating what you think is too much of something and then saying screw it and just eating all of it, promising that you'll start over tomorrow. This is a very common dieting pattern. But what often happens is that you end up with a brain that automatically offers binge eating as a solution to eating in a way that you don't think is perfect or right. And it offers binging as a solution to not following all of your shoulds surrounding food. For example, if you tell yourself that you should be avoiding food before a certain time of day, and then you eat something before that time, you may have thoughts like, you're a failure, you can't even eat in the way that you should, so you might as well binge. It's as if the connection in your brain goes from thinking that you did not eat, quote, right, to then encouraging you to eat in a way that you know is completely and utterly wrong. Looking at this from the outside, you can see that it's not rational. It doesn't make any sense for binge eating to be the solution for eating that's not perfect. But I know that most binge eaters' brains have this irrational pattern, and that it can seem very real and convincing in the moment. I know it did for me. I definitely knew that binge eating was not the way that I should have been eating, but my lower brain made it seem like the logical thing to do. So instead of learning to accept imperfection, you may end up being caught in a pattern of trying to eat perfectly, and then not being able to do that because no one can eat perfectly, and then jumping right into thinking that because you can't be perfect, you might as well binge. You can certainly dismiss that thought and dismiss the urge to binge, and you can stop giving attention to any thought that says binge eating makes sense for any reason. But what can also help with this specific situation is to stop thinking that you should be eating in a certain way in the first place. It's very difficult to go through life with so much overthinking and self-criticism surrounding food. And even if you stop binging, you don't want to continue having to deal with that. Now, I realize there are certain people who do need to be eating in a certain way due to specific health issues and also food allergies and sensitivities. But most of the rules people create for themselves are not related to those things, but they're instead related to something they saw on the internet about the way they should be eating, or a trendy new diet plan, or a way of eating that they think will help them attain a certain body type. This issue about overthinking how you should eat came up in my Instagram live session, and some of what I'll say here in the rest of this podcast is based on my answer to that question. And I'll just stop here and say that for those of you who don't know, I'm doing an Instagram live Q&A session on the third Tuesday of each month from 1 p.m. Eastern Time to 2 p.m. I've had 8 of these Q&A sessions so far, and the recordings of the sessions go on my course website for course members, so that's 8 hours of me answering questions just from those Instagram Live recordings alone. And the course also includes over 120 other tracks and additional resources, and it's only $11 per month to have access to all of this. You can learn more about this and subscribe to the course in the show description or by going to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. Now, getting back to dropping the shoulds around eating, every time that you have thoughts that feel stressful and say that you should be eating in this way or that way, or that you should not have eaten in a certain way, I want you to start questioning those thoughts. What if it's not true that the way you think you should be eating is the way you really should be eating? What if there are not any shoulds around eating? Of course, you know you do not want to be binge eating, but as far as your other eating habits, what if you approach eating with your options open to you and without thinking that there's one right way? Because there really is no one right way to eat. There is no exact blueprint. The more you can see that your shoulds are pretty arbitrary, the less likely you'll be to believe them and let them create a lot of unnecessary pressure for yourself. Let's go back to that previous example about the thought saying that you should not eat before a certain time in the day. What if that's simply not true? What if it's simply not true for you personally? What if it's not true in certain situations? What if it's totally optional to eat whenever? And what if it's optional to believe the thoughts that tell you what you should or should not do with food? The way you can see how arbitrary your brain's should thoughts are is to consider that it's possible to think a completely opposite thought. For example, if you think you should not eat meat, there are people out there who think that they should be eating mostly meat. If you think that you should be fasting for 16 hours every day, there are people out there who think they should be eating, let's say, every couple of hours. I encourage you to start dropping the pressure that you're putting on yourself and to start thinking that you should be eating in exactly the way that you are eating, or in exactly the way that you just ate. And here I'm talking about eating habits that are not binging. It gives you a ton of freedom to think, maybe I ate exactly as I should have. And this is not about tricking yourself into thinking that you ate healthy when you clearly didn't, or that you ate the perfect amount when you feel like you've overeaten a little. But it is about accepting the way that you ate in that moment. And maybe there's something to learn from that, but either way, you can simply move on without all of the overthinking. Consider that you can just eat and let it be what it is. Consider that you can make a decision about food in the moment that you think is best for you, for whatever reason, and eat the food, and then let go of all of the overthinking afterward and simply go on with your life. And the next time you eat, you can just repeat this process of doing the best you can and thinking that's the way it should be. In that process of deciding what to eat, you may certainly take into account health information, or you'll take into account what foods are going to make you feel good, or what time it is, or when you'll be eating again, or where you are, or who you're eating with, or what food you have available. But a sound decision does not have to involve shoulds or a lot of pressure. When you take into account any situation that presents itself, and you decide what to eat, know that if you think about it, your decision is usually going to be what you might consider an imperfect decision. It's great to know that you can eat in a way that's not perfect, and you can still not binge. But I also want you to know that you don't have to spend any time focusing on the fact that you're not eating in a perfect way. For example, you don't have to tell yourself, I did not eat perfectly, but that's okay, I can still not binge. And of course that's true, but you can simply just say, I ate. You can keep it neutral. You simply decided what to eat, and you ate, and that's the end of the story for that meal or that snack. You may or may not learn something from that experience that you can use going forward, but there's no use dwelling on what you feel was not right or not perfect about your eating. And additionally, it's very helpful to turn things around in a more positive way. Instead of just saying, I ate, you can eat and say, that was delicious, or that was exactly what I needed in this moment, or that was what I should have eaten. This will help train your brain to associate eating with decisiveness and confidence and satisfaction, and it will break the habit of constantly second-guessing yourself. Giving yourself this freedom to decide what to eat without all of the shoulds does not mean that you're going to suddenly start choosing terrible foods. In fact, it will probably greatly improve your eating because you avoid the whole mindset of thinking that you ate imperfectly, so you might as well eat everything in sight and then start over eating, quote, perfectly tomorrow. Each time you eat, simply choose the foods and the amounts that you feel make sense to you, and then dismiss any urges to binge that you may have, and also dismiss thoughts that say that your eating should have been different in some way. Even if you truly feel that it should have been different in some way, ask yourself, according to who and why? Often we don't stop to ask ourselves where these self-imposed rules are coming from and if we even believe them. It can be very difficult for all of us to decipher health and eating information these days. Experts and people on the internet and in your life will tell you to eat in this way or that way, and it can create a lot of noise in your head. But I want you to start believing that that noise is optional. I want you to start believing that you can make your own decisions about food without all of the outside influences and without all of the thoughts in your head that are based on those outside influences. And if there's something that you feel you do need to change about your eating, there's nothing wrong with making adjustments, but you'll make those changes because you want to, and from a place of self-care, not from a place of creating rigid food rules. When you drop the shoulds, it does not mean you'll never make positive changes to your eating. It's just that the changes you do make will be from your own insights into what is most helpful for you, and you'll be kind to yourself in the process of making those changes. When you stop believing all of the shoulds, you'll realize that eating does not have to be so hard, and you'll realize you're doing much better than you think. You're just eating, and then getting back to living. That's all for this discussion about dropping the shoulds around eating, and in my next show, I'm going to talk about a related topic, which will be dropping the I don't knows around eating, because I truly believe that you know more than you think about making food decisions for yourself in the moment. Thank you so much for listening today. Remember that you can get those 8 Instagram Live Q&A recordings that are 1 hour each, plus the entire Brain Over Binge course to guide you as you recover at brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And if you're someone who needs that personalized support along the way, as well as accountability, I encourage you to get some one-on-one coaching from Julie, who is doing some amazing work helping people toward freedom from struggles with food. There's a link in the show description to learn more about coaching, or you can go to brainoverbinge.com and click coaching in the main menu. Again, I appreciate you being here today, and I hope you'll join me again next time. As always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.